This seat isn't yours. The flight attendant's voice sliced through the cabin so sharply that my hands flew instinctively to my belly, cradling the small bump that had become my entire world. I was 4 months pregnant, an unmated Omega traveling alone, and suddenly every pair of eyes in economy class was fixed on me like I'd committed some unforgivable crime. The attendant snatched my boarding pass from my trembling fingers, her smile so artificially bright it made my stomach turn. Pregnant Omegas require medical clearance for economy class travel. Why wasn't this disclosed during booking? My throat constricted as I fumbled for my phone, desperate to prove I'd followed every rule, filled out every form correctly. I submitted everything online. The confirmation emails are right here. But she swatted my hand away as though my touch alone could contaminate her, her nose wrinkling in obvious disgust. The rejection stung worse than any physical blow. Around me, passengers began pulling out their phones. Some were clearly recording, probably already composing captions for their social media posts about the problematic Omega holding up their flight. A woman 2 rows back physically pulled her child closer, shielding the little girl from me as if pregnancy itself were contagious. My vision blurred with unshed tears, but I forced myself to blink them back rapidly. Showing weakness here would only make things worse. I couldn't afford to break down, not in front of these strangers who'd already decided I was somehow less than human. Listen carefully, the attendant said, clutching her clipboard like a weapon. You have 2 options. Either you deplane voluntarily right now, or I call security to remove you forcibly. Your choice. My entire body went cold. My mother was waiting for me in Seattle, fresh out of major surgery, recovering alone because I was her only family. She needed me. I needed to get to her. And yet here I was, trapped in this nightmare because of one power-hungry airline employee's personal vendetta against Omegas like me. Then the cabin door opened. A scent hit me with the force of a physical wave. Sandalwood layered with something wild and untamed. Something that made every nerve ending in my body stand at attention. My Omega instincts, dormant for months since I'd left my ex, suddenly roared to life. The air itself seemed to shift, growing heavier, charged with an energy I couldn't name. Every passenger in the cabin fell silent, heads turning toward the source of that overwhelming presence. He was tall, easily over 6 feet, with shoulders that filled out his impeccably tailored black suit in a way that suggested real strength beneath the expensive fabric. His face was all sharp angles, high cheekbones, a strong jaw that could have been carved from marble, and eyes the color of storm clouds gathering before a hurricane. Those eyes swept across the cabin with casual authority, taking in the scene before they landed on me. For a heartbeat, our gazes locked, and something in my chest tightened painfully. What's the problem here? His voice was deep, carrying the kind of natural authority that made people instinctively straighten their spines and pay attention. Every syllable was crisp, controlled, dangerous. The flight attendant's face drained of all color in an instant. Mr. Cashin, sir, this passenger has violated protocol and I was handling the situation according. I asked what the problem was, not for your justification. He cut her off without raising his voice, which somehow made the reprimand even more devastating. Then he turned to me, his expression shifting to something I couldn't quite read. You, tell me what happened. My mouth went dry. This was Reed Cashin. I recognized the name from business magazines, from news articles about airline acquisitions and corporate restructuring. He owned this airline. He owned the entire fleet. And he was standing 3 feet away from me waiting for my answer. She said my voice came out barely above a whisper, so I forced myself to speak louder. She told me pregnant Omegas need special clearance for economy class. But I filled out all the medical forms during online check-in. I have the confirmation numbers, the approval emails, everything they asked for. Reed's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He held out one hand toward the flight attendant without even looking at her. Show me the protocol that requires public humiliation of distressed passengers. Sir, the guidelines clearly state, show me. Each word was clipped, precise, leaving no room for argument. The attendant's hands shook as she flipped through papers on her clipboard, her fingers fumbling uselessly through standard safety procedures and customer service scripts. The silence stretched out, painful and awkward, as it became increasingly obvious she had no actual policy to reference. Reed pulled out his phone with deliberate slowness. Marcus, I need you to ground the Terminal B supervisor immediately. Also, the crew member with badge number 4719, suspend her pending a investigation into passenger harassment. He paused, his storm cloud eyes never leaving the now trembling attendant. And Marcus, I want a complete audit of our training program by tomorrow morning. If this is what we're teaching our staff, we have a serious problem. My heart hammered against my ribcage so violently I was certain everyone could hear it. This stranger, this impossibly powerful alpha, was dismantling someone's career for me. Because of me. The logical part of my brain screamed that this was excessive, that I should tell him to stop, but the omega in me, the part I'd tried so hard to suppress, was practically purring with satisfaction at his protectiveness. He ended the call and turned back to me, and suddenly his entire demeanor shifted. The harsh authority melted away, replaced by something softer, though no less intense. Are you all right? Did she hurt you? Touch you inappropriately? I shook my head quickly, finding my voice again. No, she didn't. I mean, she grabbed my boarding pass, but she didn't actually. You're shaking. He stated it as a simple fact, but I could hear the concern underneath. And you're stressed. That's not good for you or the baby. How could he possibly know that? Most alphas couldn't detect such subtle changes in an omega's scent unless they were bonded or family. Yet here was this complete stranger, reading my emotional state like an open book. Before I could formulate a response, he gently grasped my elbow, his touch careful, reverent, as though I were made of spun glass that might shatter at any moment. You're not staying in economy. Come with me. I can't. Your ticket is irrelevant. He guided me down the aisle with one hand at the small of my back, protective without being possessive. You'll be in first class for the remainder of the flight. No arguments. The first-class cabin was a different world entirely. Private suites with doors, ambient lighting that didn't assault the senses, and that sandalwood scent growing stronger with each step, wrapping around me like a security blanket I hadn't known I needed. Reed gestured to a plush seat that looked more comfortable than my entire apartment. Sit. Rest. No one will bother you here. I lowered myself into the seat carefully, still processing everything that had just happened. You didn't have to do any of this. Fire someone. Move me up here. I'm nobody. Just another passenger. Reed crouched down so we were at eye level, and the intensity in his gaze made my breath catch. What I saw back there was wrong. And I don't allow wrong things to happen on my mind. He paused, something flickering across his expression too quickly for me to identify. Especially not to you. Especially not to you. Those 4 words echoed in my mind long after he stood and moved to the seat across from mine, leaving me alone with my racing thoughts and the terrifying realization that my carefully controlled life had just been turned completely upside down. Reed Cashin settled into the seat opposite mine with the kind of natural grace that suggested he was accustomed to commanding any space he occupied. He opened a sleek laptop, fingers moving efficiently across the keyboard, but I could feel his attention on me like a physical touch. Every time I shifted position or rested my hand on my belly, his eyes would flick up briefly before returning to his screen. The awareness between us was almost tangible, a living thing that neither of us acknowledged but both of us felt. I turned my face toward the window, watching ground crew members scurrying around the tarmac far below. My mind kept replaying what had just happened. The humiliation, the fear, and then Reed's intervention like something out of a fantasy I'd never dared to have. My ex-alpha, Dylan, had always told me I was too emotional, too sensitive, that I created problems where none existed. When I'd discovered I was pregnant, he'd called me irresponsible, said that an unmated omega carrying a child was a social embarrassment he couldn't afford to be associated with. He'd walked away without a backward glance, leaving me to figure out everything alone. What's your name? Reed's question pulled me from my spiraling thoughts. I met his gaze, those storm-gray eyes holding an intensity that made my pulse quicken. Corey Jensen. He repeated it slowly, almost thoughtfully, as though testing how it felt in his mouth. Where are you headed, Corey Jensen? Seattle. My mother just had surgery, a complicated procedure. She's all alone, and I'm all she has left. The words tumbled out before I could stop them, revealing more than I'd intended to a man who was still essentially a stranger. And you're alpha? The question was casual, but I saw the subtle tension in his shoulders, the way his fingers stilled on the keyboard, Is he meeting you there? The familiar ache settled in my chest, that hollow feeling of abandonment I'd tried so hard to ignore. There is no Alpha, just me and the baby. I forced myself to meet his eyes as I said it, refusing to show shame for my situation even though society had made it clear what they thought of unmated pregnant omegas. Reed closed his laptop with a decisive click, giving me his complete attention. He leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees, and the movement brought him close enough that his scent washed over me again. Stronger now, mixing with my own until I couldn't tell where his ended and mine began. The Alpha who left you. He doesn't deserve you. Not you, and certainly not your child. His conviction hit me like a punch to the gut. You don't understand. Maybe I really was the problem. Maybe I expected too much, or didn't communicate properly, or stop. The single word was firm but not harsh. An Omega who stands up to protect their baby is never the problem. Do you hear me? Never. Tears welled up despite my best efforts to contain them. Crying seemed to be all I did lately, my hormones making me ridiculously emotional at the smallest kindness. Why do you even care? You don't know anything about me. Reed was quiet for a long moment, studying me with an expression I couldn't decipher. I know that you're brave enough to travel alone while pregnant. I know you're protective of your child even when you're scared. I know you tried to stand up for yourself against that attendant even though the odds were stacked against you. He paused. And I know that when I saw you sitting there terrified and alone, something in me demanded that I fix it, that I protect you. The word protect sent a shiver down my spine. Alphas didn't talk about protecting random Omegas they'd just met. That kind of language implied something deeper, something instinctual that I wasn't ready to examine too closely. I should thank you, I managed, swiping at my eyes. For what you did back there. You didn't have to get involved. Yes, I did. His response was immediate and absolute. The treatment you received was unacceptable. It violated every standard I've tried to implement in this company. He pulled out his phone again, scrolling through what looked like an email chain. I'm having my head of operations review all our policies regarding pregnant passengers. What happened to you won't happen to anyone else. I stared at him, overwhelmed by the idea that my awful experience might actually lead to positive change. You're really going to revamp your entire system because of one incident? I'm going to revamp our entire system because it failed you. That's one incident too many. The fierceness in his voice made my Omega instincts sing with approval, recognizing an Alpha who actually meant what they said. A flight attendant appeared, different from the one who'd accosted me. This one professional and courteous, with a menu and a gentle smile. Mr. Cashin, would you or your guest like anything to drink before takeoff? Water for me, Reed said, then looked at me expectantly. Corey, just water is fine, thank you. My voice came out steadier than I felt. After the attendant left, Reed leaned back in his seat but kept his focus entirely on me. When we land in Seattle, my driver will take you wherever you need to go. Hospital, hotel, wherever your mother is recovering. I can't accept, it's not up for debate. He softened the words with a slight smile. Consider it part of our customer service recovery program. You don't have a customer service recovery program that includes personal drivers. I surprised myself by almost smiling back. I do now. The engines began to rumble as we prepared for takeoff. I gripped the armrests instinctively, my anxiety about flying always worse when I was stressed. Reed noticed immediately. Without a word, he reached across the space between us and placed his hand over mine. Not grabbing, not constraining, just offering steady pressure and warmth. I've logged over 10,000 flight hours. Statistically, you're safer up here than driving on the ground. His thumb moved in small soothing circles against my wrist. Just breathe. I've got you. I've got you. Those 3 words shouldn't have meant as much as they did. I barely knew this man. He was a wealthy Alpha who happened to own the airline I was flying on. Nothing more. And yet, sitting there with his hand covering mine and his scent surrounding me like armor, I felt safer than I had in months, maybe safer than I'd ever felt. The plane lifted smoothly into the air, and I realized I'd closed my eyes at some point, focusing entirely on the solid warmth of Reed's hand and the steady rhythm of his breathing. When I finally opened them again, we were above the clouds, sunlight streaming through the windows and painting everything golden. Reed was watching me with an expression that made my heart stutter. Better? Yes. Thank you. I should have pulled my hand away. Instead, I found myself asking, "Do you always take such personal interest in your passengers' well-being?" His smile was slight but genuine. "No, Corey Jensen, just you." After takeoff, Reed opened his laptop again, but the pretense of work seemed thin at best. I could feel the weight of his gaze even when I pretended to look out the window, watching clouds drift past like cotton pulled apart by invisible hands. My mind kept circling back to Dylan, to the crushing moment when he'd looked at me with disgust and said I'd ruined everything. He'd made me feel like my pregnancy was a burden, a mistake that reflected poorly on him rather than a miracle we'd created together. "Tell me about Seattle." Reed's voice interrupted my downward spiral. "Have you lived there long?" I shifted in my seat, grateful for the distraction. "I grew up there, left for college in Portland, thought I'd make a life somewhere else. But when my mom got sick, there wasn't really a choice. She needed me. I touched my belly unconsciously, and now I need her too." Reed nodded slowly, absorbing this information. "Family is important, worth sacrificing for." "Do you have family in Seattle?" I found myself curious about this alpha who'd upended my entire day. "Business takes me there frequently. I have properties in several cities." He answered the question without really answering it, I noticed. "What about the father? Is he in Seattle?" There it was. The question I'd been dreading. I took a deep breath, deciding honesty was easier than evasion. "Dylan lives in Portland. We worked at the same marketing firm. Everything was fine until..." I gestured vaguely at my stomach. He had very specific ideas about what his life should look like, and a pregnant unmated Omega wasn't part of that picture. Reed's expression darkened, his scent sharpening with something that felt almost like anger, though it wasn't directed at me. He abandoned his own child. He said I should have been more careful, that Omegas who don't have a bond or a formal arrangement shouldn't. I stopped, the words too painful to continue. He made it very clear that this baby and I were liabilities he couldn't afford, and yet you kept the baby anyway. There was something like admiration in Reed's tone. "That takes courage." I laughed, but it came out bitter. "Or stupidity. I'm 4 months along, unemployed, living off my savings while trying to help my mother recover. Not exactly the picture of responsible decision-making." "You're protecting your child. There's nothing stupid about that." Reed set his laptop aside entirely now, giving me his undivided attention. "What happened with your job?" "Morning sickness happened. Missed deadlines happened. And when they found out I was pregnant without a mate, the HR department suddenly discovered all sorts of performance issues they needed to document. The memory still stung. I quit before they could fire me. At least that way I had some dignity left." Reed's jaw clenched visibly. "That's discrimination. You could have fought them legally. With what resources? Legal battles cost money I don't have. And I need to focus on staying healthy for the baby." I smoothed my hand over my small bump. "Some fights aren't worth the energy. Every fight is worth it when you're right." His intensity was almost overwhelming. "You deserved better. From your employer, from your alpha, from everyone who should have protected you." The way he said protected as if it were a sacred duty rather than a choice made something warm unfurl in my chest. "Why does this matter so much to you? I'm just a random passenger you happened to encounter." Reed stood abruptly, moving to the small kitchenette area of the first-class cabin. He returned moments later with a bottle of water and what looked like a packet of crackers. "Eat something. Low blood sugar won't help with the stress." "You didn't answer my question." I took the crackers anyway, suddenly realizing I was actually hungry. He settled back into his seat, watching me with those storm cloud eyes that seemed to see too much. "When I was younger, my sister became pregnant unexpectedly. No bond, no formal arrangement. Our parents, traditional alphas, very concerned with appearances, pressured her to end it. She refused." His expression grew distant, lost in memory. "They cut her off completely. Financial support, family ties, everything. She had to do it alone." My breath caught. "What happened to her?" "She survived. Thrived, actually. Built her own business. Raised a beautiful daughter who's in college now. But it was harder than it ever should have been." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees again. "I helped where I could, but I was barely starting my own company at the time. Resources were limited. I watched her struggle and promised myself that if I ever had the power to make things easier for Omegas in similar situations, I would." Understanding dawned. So when you saw me, I saw my sister. I saw every Omega who's been abandoned and shamed for choosing their child over social acceptance. His hand twitched like he wanted to reach for me but held himself back. And I saw someone who needed help, who deserved better than what she was getting. Tears threatened again, but these were different from the earlier ones. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. Reed's smile was gentle. Just let me help. Please. The please undid me. This powerful alpha, who clearly commanded respect and obedience in his professional life, was asking, not demanding, for permission to offer assistance. Okay, I whispered. Okay. Something shifted in the air between us, a subtle change that felt significant even though nothing had been explicitly stated. Reed's shoulders relaxed fractionally, and his scent, that sandalwood and wilderness combination, seemed to wrap around me more completely, like he was marking me as under his protection without either of us acknowledging it. How are you feeling physically, I mean? His concern was genuine, not perfunctory. The stress from early. I'm all right. The baby's been active today, which the doctor says is a good sign. I found myself opening up without meaning to. Every kick feels like a reminder that this is real, that I'm actually going to be someone's parent. You're going to be an excellent parent. The certainty in his voice startled me. Anyone who fights as hard as you already have for their child. That's what matters. Not having a mate, not having a perfect situation, just having the will to protect and nurture. You sound very sure about someone you just met. Reed's expression turned serious, almost vulnerable. I'm good at reading people, Corey. It's kept me alive in business for 15 years. And everything I've seen of you in the past hour tells me you're strong, brave, and fiercely protective. Those are the qualities that matter. Before I could respond, turbulence shook the plane, gentle but unexpected. My hands flew to my belly instinctively, and Reed was out of his seat in an instant, crouching beside me. Just routine air pockets. Nothing to worry about. Here he reached up and adjusted my seatbelt, ensuring it sat below my bump rather than across it. Better? I nodded, hyper-aware of how close he was, how his scent filled my senses completely. Thank you, for everything. It's not charity, Corey. His hand lingered near mine on the armrest. Helping you, it feels right. Necessary. Like something I was meant to do. Fated mates. The concept whispered through my mind unbidden. But that was fantasy, wasn't it? Stories told to Omega children about perfect alphas who would recognize their destined partners on sight. Real life didn't work that way. Except Reed was looking at me like maybe, just maybe, it did. The flight attendant appeared with menus midway through our journey, her professionalism a stark contrast to the earlier disaster. Reed didn't even glance at his menu before speaking. The lady will have the grilled salmon with roasted vegetables. Make sure it's fresh, not reheated, and bring a selection of herbal teas, chamomile, peppermint, ginger. No caffeine. He looked at me then, one eyebrow raised in question. Unless you prefer something else. I blinked, startled by how easily he'd taken charge. That sounds perfect, actually. How did you know I've been craving salmon? Omega instincts during pregnancy tend toward protein-rich foods. Salmon provides omega-3s that are crucial for fetal brain development. He said it matter-of-factly, as though every alpha walked around with encyclopedic knowledge of prenatal nutrition. My sister lived on fish and leafy greens for 9 months. I learned more than I ever wanted to know about pregnancy diets. The mention of his sister again made my chest tighten. He'd shared something deeply personal earlier. A vulnerability I hadn't expected from someone in his position. Your sister sounds like she was lucky to have you supporting her. I could have done more. Should have done more. There was regret in his voice. Old guilt that had clearly never fully healed. But I was young and stupid, focused on building my empire instead of be there when she needed me most. I won't make that mistake twice. The implication hung between us, unspoken but clear. He was talking about me now, about this situation. Before I could figure out how to respond, the attendant returned with our meals. The salmon was perfectly cooked, the vegetables seasoned just right. And I found myself eating with more appetite than I'd had in weeks. Reed watched me with barely concealed satisfaction, nursing a black coffee while occasionally checking his phone. Does your mother know about your situation? He asked, his tone carefully neutral. About the baby, about Dylan leaving. I swallowed a bite of asparagus before answering. She knows everything. She was furious when I told her how Dylan reacted. wanted to drive to Portland and give him a piece of her mind. But she also told me something I needed to hear, that if an alpha doesn't value you enough to stand by you, then he was never truly yours to begin with. Reed's expression softened with approval. Your mother is a wise woman. I look forward to meeting her properly. You don't have to. I started, but he cut me off with a raised hand. When we land, my driver will take us to the hospital. You shouldn't have to navigate public transportation or expensive rideshares while pregnant and stressed. It's not negotiable, Corey. But then his expression shifted, became almost playful, though I'm beginning to suspect you're the type who argues about everything on principle. Despite myself, I smiled. Only when stubborn alphas try to make decisions for me without asking first. Noted. I'll rephrase. He leaned back in his seat, arms crossed, a hint of amusement dancing in those storm cloud eyes. Corey Jensen, would you do me the honor of accepting a ride to the hospital when we land? It would ease my conscience considerably, and I promise the driver doesn't bite. The formality of it, the exaggerated courtesy, made me laugh, a real laugh that seemed to surprise both of us. When you put it that way, how can I refuse? You can't. That's the point. His smile was genuine now, transforming his entire face from intimidating alpha to something warmer, more approachable. Hours later, exhaustion finally caught up with me. I must have dozed off without realizing it, because when I opened my eyes, there was a luxuriously soft cashmere blanket draped over me, and my neck pillow had been adjusted to provide better support. Reed stood near the cabin door, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in low tones that nonetheless carried authority. I don't care about board approval timelines, Marcus. We're implementing mandatory sensitivity training for all customer-facing staff within the next 30 days. If anyone has a problem with that, they can submit their resignation. A pause. And make sure the incident report stays internal. I won't have Corey's privacy violated by some opportunistic journalist looking for a headline. He was still protecting me even when I wasn't aware enough to protect myself. The realization settled warm and heavy in my chest. Something dangerous and addictive that I knew I should probably resist but couldn't quite bring myself to. Reed noticed me watching and ended his call, returning to his seat with fluid grace. Did you rest well? I nodded, suddenly nervous about asking what I needed to ask. Reed, why are you doing all of this? And please don't tell me it's just about your sister or company policy. There's something more, isn't there? He was quiet for a long moment, studying me with an intensity that made my breath catch. Finally, he leaned forward, elbows on his knees, close enough that I could see flecks of silver in those gray eyes. When I saw you in that cabin, alone and afraid but still fighting, something in my alpha broke open. It felt like recognition, like some part of me had been waiting for you knowing it. He paused, seeming to struggle for words. I can't explain it rationally. I just know that keeping you safe feels more important than anything else I've ever done. Like it's what I was meant to do. My heart hammered so hard I was certain he could hear it. Fated mates. The concept was supposed to be folklore, stories told to Omega children about destined bonds that transcended logic. But sitting here with Reed's scent wrapping around me like a living thing, feeling the pull between us that defied all reasonable explanation, I couldn't dismiss it as easily as I wanted to. That terrifies me, I whispered honestly. The idea of trusting someone again, of letting anyone get close enough to hurt me the way Dylan did. I know. His voice was gentle, understanding. I'm not asking you to trust me completely. Not yet. I'm just asking you to let me help. To give me the chance to prove that all alphas are like the one who abandoned you. The plane began its descent into Seattle, the announcement crackling overhead about preparing for landing. Through the window I could see the city lights spreading out below us like scattered stars. And somewhere down there my mother was waiting. My old life was waiting. But sitting across from Reed I couldn't shake the feeling that my old life had just ended. And whatever came next would be something entirely different. Okay, I said finally, meeting his eyes. I'll let you help. But Reed, if this goes wrong, if you change your mind about any of this, I won't. The certainty in his voice was absolute, unshakable. I'm a lot of things, Corey, but I'm not a man who breaks his promises. And I'm promising you now I'm not going anywhere. The plane touched down smoothly, and as we taxied toward the gate, I realized that somewhere between being humiliated in economy and landing in first class with an alpha who looked at me like I mattered, my entire world had shifted on its axis. Whether that shift would save me or destroy me remained to be seen. The private exit Reed guided me through was a world away from the chaos of regular terminal traffic. No crowds, no gawking passengers with their phones out, just a quiet corridor that led directly to where a sleek black SUV waited at the curb. The driver, a professional-looking man in his 50s, opened the door with a respectful nod as Reed helped me inside. Seattle General Hospital, Reed instructed as he slid in beside me, maintaining a respectful distance that somehow felt too far. His scent had become a comfort over the past few hours, and without it surrounding me completely, I felt oddly exposed. The drive through Seattle streets should have been familiar. I'd grown up in this city, knew these roads by heart. But everything looked different through the tinted windows of Reed's car, separated from the world I'd left behind. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother's nurse. "She's awake and asking for you. Take your time, sweetheart. You didn't have to come with me to the hospital," I said, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled between us. "You must have important things to attend to." Reed glanced at me and there was something almost amused in his expression. "I have a company to run, Corey. That company will survive without my physical presence for a few hours. You, however, are my priority right now. Get used to it." The casual possessiveness should have bothered me more than it did. Instead, I found myself relaxing into the leather seat, letting his certainty wash over me like a balm. When we arrived at the hospital, Reed stayed close but not suffocating, his hand at the small of my back as we navigated the corridors toward my mother's room. I knocked softly before entering, and my mother's voice, weaker than I remembered but still unmistakably hers, called out permission to enter. She was propped up in bed, her gray hair spread across the pillow, her face pale but her eyes bright with relief when she saw me. "Corey, sweetheart." She held out her arms and I went to her, careful not to jostle her post-surgical body as I embraced her. "I'm so glad you made it safely." "I'm here, Mom. How are you feeling?" I pulled back to study her face, cataloging every sign of pain or discomfort. Her gaze drifted past me to where Reed stood respectfully near the door, giving us our moment but present nonetheless. "And who is this handsome alpha you've brought with you?" Heat crept up my neck. "This is Reed Cashin. There was an incident on the flight, and he helped me. He insisted on making sure I got here safely." My mother's expression sharpened with that particular maternal intuition that could read volumes from a single glance. She looked at Reed, then at me, then back at Reed. "An incident? Nothing Mrs. Jensen needs to worry about now," Reed said smoothly, stepping forward. "Your son handled himself admirably. I simply ensured he received the treatment he deserved as a passenger." My mother studied him for a long moment, and I knew that look. She was assessing, evaluating, determining whether this alpha could be trusted with her only child. Whatever she saw must have satisfied her because her expression softened. "Thank you, Reed. Corey has had a difficult few months. It's good to know there are still decent people in the world." "Your son is remarkably strong," Reed replied, and the genuine respect in his voice made my chest tighten. "You should be proud of the person you've raised." "I am." My mother's hand found mine, squeezed gently. "Though I worry about him being alone right now. With everything he's going through." "He's not alone." Reed's voice was firm, leaving no room for doubt. "Not anymore. I'll make certain of that." The weight of those words settled over the room like a blanket. My mother's eyes glistened with tears. She was too proud to shed, and she nodded slowly. "Good. That's good." I spent the next hour with my mother, updating her on my prenatal appointments, listening to her post-surgery recovery plan, carefully avoiding any mention of Dylan or my precarious financial situation. Reed had excused himself to the waiting room, giving us privacy but remaining close enough that I could feel his presence like a tether keeping me grounded. When I finally emerged, I found him exactly where I'd expected, seated with a cup of coffee, scrolling through his phone with the air of a man accustomed to working from anywhere. He looked up immediately when I approached, his attention shifting entirely to me. "She looks good, tired, but strong." I accepted the second cup he'd apparently gotten for me. "Decaf," I noted, "perfectly appropriate for pregnancy. She seems like the type who raised you to be independent and self-sufficient." Reed stood, disposing of his cup in a nearby bin. "Which brings me to my next question. Where are you staying while you're in Seattle?" The question I'd been dreading. I considered lying, making up some story about a friend's apartment or a nice hotel. But Reed had been nothing but honest with me. And he deserved the same in return. There's a motel downtown. It's not fancy, but it's affordable. And I only need it until Mom is discharged and I can help her at home. Reed's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping near his temple. Show me the address, Reed. It's fine, Corey. He stepped closer, not touching me but close enough that his scent surrounded me again, grounding and protective. Show me the address, please. Something in his tone made me pull out my phone and show him the booking confirmation. I watched his expression darken as he read the motel name. Saw the location in one of Seattle's less desirable neighborhoods. Absolutely not. His voice was flat, brooking no argument. You're not staying there, you're coming home with me. Reed, I can't just— You're not a burden. He cut me off, his hand gently catching my wrist, thumb pressing against my pulse point in a gesture that felt both possessive and reassuring. You're my responsibility now. Do you understand? Mine to protect, mine to care for. And I won't let you stay in some rundown motel when I have a perfectly good home with more than enough space. His intensity should have frightened me. This was too much too fast. An alpha I'd known for less than 12 hours declaring ownership over my well-being with absolute conviction. But my omega instincts, which had been dormant and damaged since Dylan's abandonment, were singing with approval. This alpha meant what he said. This alpha would keep his promises. I don't want to impose, I said weakly, my resistance crumbling. You're not imposing. You're accepting help from someone who wants to give it. His thumb traced small circles on my wrist, the touch sending shivers up my arm. Say yes, Corey. Let me do this. And because I was tired and scared and so desperately lonely that the idea of his continued presence felt like oxygen after drowning, I nodded. Okay. Yes. I'll stay with you. The relief that washed over his face was palpable. And in that moment I realized something terrifying. Reed Cashin needed to protect me almost as much as I needed to be protected. Reed's penthouse occupied the top floor of a gleaming high-rise in downtown Seattle. All floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased the city skyline like a living painting. The space was modern and masculine. Dark woods, leather furniture, clean lines, but softened by thoughtful touches that suggested actual living rather than just existing. Books lined built-in shelves. Artwork that looked original rather than decorative dotted the walls, and the scent that I'd come to associate with Reed permeated every corner. The guest suite is through here. He led me down a hallway to a room that was easily twice the size of my entire Portland apartment. A king-sized bed dominated the space, made up with what looked like Egyptian cotton sheets in soft gray. There's a walk-in closet, though you'll obviously need to get some things. We can arrange shopping tomorrow if you'd like. The bathroom is fully stocked, but if you need anything specific, just let me know. I stood in the doorway, overwhelmed. This is too much. This is appropriate. Reed moved past me into the room, opening a door I hadn't noticed. And this connects to what I thought could be a nursery. It's empty right now, but we can furnish it however you want. Whatever makes you comfortable. Whatever the baby needs. My breath caught. You planned this? The nursery, I mean. Before I even agreed to come here, he had the grace to look slightly sheepish. I had my assistant prepare the space this afternoon, while we were in flight. I know you're stubborn, Corey, and I know you have every reason to be wary. But my alpha knew you'd end up here eventually. It was just a matter of time. The certainty with which he said it should have set off alarm bells. Instead, I found myself drawn into the empty room that would become my child's nursery, imagining it filled with a crib and changing table, soft blankets and tiny clothes. Dylan had never wanted to discuss nurseries or baby names or any of the things that expectant parents typically plan together. He'd made it clear that acknowledging the pregnancy meant acknowledging his failure to prevent it. When did you know? I asked quietly, still staring at the empty space. When did you decide that I was worth all this effort? Reed came to stand beside me, close enough that our arms nearly touched. The exact moment I saw that flight attendant treating you like you were disposable. Something in me rejected that reality completely. You weren't disposable. You were precious, and from that second forward, every decision I've made has been about ensuring your safety and comfort. I turned to face him fully, searching his expression for any hint of deception or ulterior motive. All I found was raw honesty, an intensity that made my knees weak. We barely know each other. This doesn't make sense, Reed. You realize that, right? This whole situation is completely irrational. Some of the most important things in life are irrational. His hand came up to cup my face, thumb tracing along my cheekbone with devastating gentleness. Logic says I should have let you handle your situation, maybe filed a complaint on your behalf, and moved on with my day. But logic doesn't account for the way my alpha recognized you. Logic doesn't explain why walking away from you feels physically impossible. Fated mates. Neither of us said it aloud, but the words hung between us like a confession we weren't quite ready to make. My body swayed toward his unconsciously, drawn by forces I didn't fully understand and wasn't sure I wanted to fight. I'm terrified, I whispered. Of trusting this, of trusting you, of what happens if this all falls apart. Then be terrified with me. His forehead pressed against mine, his breath warm against my lips. Because I'm just as scared, Corey. I've built an empire, made billion-dollar decisions without breaking a sweat. But the thought of failing you, of not being what you and that baby need, that keeps me up at night. The vulnerability in his admission cracked something open inside me. This wasn't just an alpha offering charity or satisfying some protective instinct. This was a man offering his heart with no guarantee of return, risking rejection because the alternative was walking away. And walking away was no longer an option for either of us. Stay with me, he murmured, and I realized we'd shifted closer somehow, his hands on my waist now, steadying me. Not just tonight, not just until your mother recovers. Stay with me while you figure out what comes next. Let me be your safe place while you rebuild. Every rational thought screamed at me to say no, to maintain boundaries, to protect myself from potential heartbreak. But my omega instincts, stronger now than they'd been since before Dylan's abandonment, were singing a different song. They recognized this alpha's sincerity, understood that his offer came from someplace deep and true. What if I'm not what you think I am? My voice broke on the question. What if you get to know me and realize I'm just a mess, that I'm not worth all this trouble? Reed's laugh was soft, almost sad. Corey, you're 4 months pregnant, traveling alone to care for your sick mother, still standing despite everyone who should have supported you failing to do so. You're not a mess, you're a miracle. And I don't use that word lightly. Tears I'd been holding back spilled over, and Reed was there immediately, gathering me against his chest with infinite care. His heartbeat was steady beneath my ear, strong and sure, exactly like the man himself. I let myself cry for everything I'd lost, for everything I'd feared I'd never find, for the terrifying possibility that maybe, just maybe, I'd stumbled into exactly what I needed when I'd least expected it. I'm going to ruin your expensive shirt, I mumbled against the fabric, but made no move to pull away. I have others. His hand stroked through my hair, soothing and protective. Cry as long as you need to. I'm not going anywhere. And that was the promise that broke me completely. Not grand declarations or dramatic gestures, but the simple assurance that he would stay. That I didn't have to face any of this alone anymore. When the tears finally subsided, I pulled back enough to look up at him, to see the raw emotion swimming in those storm cloud eyes. I can't promise this will be easy. I'm dealing with a lot, and I'm not even sure who I am anymore outside of being pregnant and scared. Then we'll figure it out together. He brushed a tear from my cheek with his thumb. You don't have to have all the answers right now, Corey. You just have to be willing to let me stand beside you while you find them. The simplicity of it, the lack of pressure or expectation, made something in my chest loosen. Okay, I breathed. Okay, I'll stay. For now. For now is enough. Reed pressed a kiss to my forehead, soft and reverent. A promise sealed without words. Welcome home, Corey Jensen. Welcome home.